My name is Stella Viljoen. I'm an Associate Professor of Art History and Media Studies at Viljoen University. I wondered a little bit why Mareka wanted me to facilitate this panel and this discussion, but I do have an interest in space. I just co-edited a book that thinks of feminism as a house. And the question was whether we should redeem this, or, as the book is entitled, burn down the house. And I've recently been reading quite a lot of SAIA Award, who is just this wonderful feminist philosopher. And she wrote a book that I'm really intrigued by called Queer Phenomenology. And queer phenomenology is not really gay phenomenology. It's more upside down phenomenology. So phenomenology means the way we experience the world around us, the way we experience the world through our bodies, through our embodied natures, the way we encounter space, the way we encounter place, the way we relate to each other and the objects around us. In this book, she has a really beautiful gendered analysis of the writing table, and how we might invert the idea of the writing table as not only a masculine object, but also an object for women to work at. But I think this is interesting for us as Christians because the gospel is an upside-down gospel. Christ comes to us not as a military savior, but offers radical citizenship to women and slaves and Gentiles. And this is a kind of gospel of humility, a gospel of degradation, a gospel of the cross. So I think it's important to think about space and specifically architecture in terms of this kind of upside down logic. I want to thank Mareka and the Artists Gathering for yet again creating a kind of crossing for Christian creatives to assemble, to draw strength, to share inspiration, and to practice what this upside-down phenomenology, this queer phenomenology, might feel like. It's a real privilege for me to be here, and it's an even greater privilege to be able to chat to Gustav and Jan-Dirk. Salt Architects is a studio which is based in Cape Town that has been responsible for everything from public loos to tented campsites, private residences and pavilions. Their ethos is one of humility, meaningful innovation, and this is, I think, very significant given that architecture firms often interpret creativity with grand gestures and signature styles. They use words like optimism and relevance in one sentence, as well as coupling words like inquisitive and traditional. This is just the sort of gentle, unassuming, yet deliberate irreverence that we need more of in the creative economies. And I, for one, am moved and intrigued. Gustav Roberts is the founding director of SALT. He has an MA in architecture from the University of the Free State, but started his career in Viljoen, where he worked for Jaco Wasserval and Paul Manting on award-winning projects. He started SALT in 2015. He has won multiple CIFA Awards for architecture, a SAIA Award for Excellence, a Commonwealth Association Architect Social Impact Award, and an Architizer A+ Award in both public infrastructure and low-cost educational design. In other words, he's an impressive dude. Jan-Dirk van Walt is the director of SALT. He also has an MA in architecture from the UFS. Stella doesn't offer architecture, otherwise they have studies degrees. Before joining SALT as director in 2017, he worked on numerous acclaimed projects, including a series of high-end lodges for the Savita Group while at Gap Architects and Urban Designers. Okay. So my first question to you chaps would be, what is contextually responsive architecture, which you cite on your website, and why is it important? And I think by way of an answer, I'm going to give you the floor so that you can share 2 signature projects with us. I'm going to do some timekeeping, as I warned you, but Gustav, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stella. Thank you, everyone, Marika, for organizing this nice event. I'm not going to waste too much time because this is quite long presentations that I just have of the project, so I'm going to fly through it. It will be a bit more, not as chilled as maybe the rest of your morning thus far. So, but yeah, thanks, Stella. I'm a bit nervous about the questions that's coming after that type of the start. So the first project I'm going to go through is work we did for Calling Academy, which is a school in Stellenbosch. It's located on a farm just outside the town, and it's I'm just going to fly through the background. Most of you probably know the school. It's an NGO. They focus on very high level education for low income learners. Their financial model is quite tricky. They get a subsidy from the state, but they then have to make up the rest of the fees to educate the child with fundraising, and that includes the capital expenses for facilities they want to build. So here's a photo of the site before.
Gustav, I just want to say, I sense you're rushing, and I don't want you to rush. So relax, you can breathe.
Okay.
Don't worry about the time, it makes you unnecessarily nervous.
No, I'm an architect. You usually do things very quickly because you don't have a lot of time. So, okay, this is the site before anything was done. So it's quite a bucolic setting. It's there among the farms. It used to be an old farm school that the surrounding farmers donated, or they actually just donated the land and said this must be a school for the community as long as they're the farmers around it. And then Calling Academy, there's the original building that was there. It's still there, we just added a bit to it. So they started in here and then needed obviously space to grow into, as they would have been a bit more children than this original building could accommodate. So you can see the quick space classes at the back, typical of a school. They expand every year by a class, so you need one class the next year and then you don't have approval yet to have the new building ready, so you just get something very quickly to accommodate the kids that's coming in. This is the site, so this is the Flaabath Road. What's the road? Is it Polka Drive? The one that goes to Kuilsrivier, that side. And then you come, can you see the cursor on the screen? Yeah. Okay. There's quite a lot of constraints on the side. This dotted line here is a center line setback from the road, so we couldn't use this piece of the site that originally they thought they owned, but then subsequently government owned it and nobody really knew who owned it, so we couldn't do anything on it. There's a watercourse on both sides, which is very limiting. So the moment there's a watercourse on the side, there's a lot of regulations that gets triggered in terms of how close you are able to go to it. So eventually we ended up with only having the space available, which worked out very well because it was situated nicely in relation to the old building, and then it kind of overlooked the sports field. What they wanted was they needed extra classrooms, but also needed staff facilities. But given the nature of the organization, the budget was extremely low. It was, we didn't get a specific budget, but they just said it's more important for them that the kids get the best education even if it's under a tree. So that's the priority, and that's where the main funding will go. The building must accommodate their needs, but it should be very cheap. So our approach was all about optimization, and there were quite a few things that we were trying to optimize. Okay, I'll get into that now with the slides. So it's basically the first thing is we just looked at what materials can we use that's really affordable, but just use it in a bit of a different way that makes it specific and not just the standard thing that's applied throughout. So we use just very basic normal materials in a way that is intentional, which communicates that care and then actually gives value to the users. It just feels like you value if you're in that building. So there's just a list of the materials. Concrete blocks for the walls. In retrospect, they don't insulate at all very well, so it's not a great material to use. You can't hang anything on the wall because the skin of the brick is too thin. The floors are just concrete that's left like that. The roofs, just very standard roof trusses, and then for the ceilings we use this oriented strand board, which is just wood chips pressed together, which you usually use for a substructure. If you clad something, you put that on and then you still clad it with something else as well. But it's got a nice warm finish, and it actually helps with the acoustics, because acoustics in school is a huge problem. There's a lot of people talking and you can't hear. So acoustic treatments are very expensive, so this is kind of a good midway to mitigate the whole issue. So I was saying the use of cheap. It's actually the everyday materials that the children know that goes to the school, so it's a familiar thing, but it's used in a different way, which makes it just changes the perception of how you actually view that, even your own situation. Then the optimizing the function, because the cost of a building is directly related to the size of it. So the question was, how do we accommodate the functions that they want in a smaller possible size? So in essence what we did is we made it a bit flexible so that some of the functions can overlap. So there's one rigid function here, which is a science lab, and then this is primarily the admin area, or let me say this side of the building is a staff area, and this side of the building is another class area, but it's got a divider in between to make it a joint space, and if they have if they need to accommodate more people, they open that up and it acts like kind of almost a school hall. We created very large verandas around the whole building envelope to, that was for two reasons. The one reason is obviously you need thresholds. Going from the outside, which you're in a farm area, and then you want to go in to the inside, which is a much different space. So transitioning from the outside, like landscape area, to the inside, which is now a school institutional area, we wanted to make sure the transition space is first of all big enough that it's functional. So the space here became almost like a big internal foyer. So there's like a screen wall, that block screen wall runs down there, and then the space became that transition space, which is then the foyer to the main entrance to the admin, but also it's important for that change. Or just differentiating the difference between the inside and the outside. And then secondly, just spill over space. These facades open up to both sides to spill over on the large veranda, so it becomes very useful. And then also the way it's orientated to the sports fields, the big terrace and steps that goes down here, they actually use the veranda and the steps there as an assembly area. So somebody stands here and addresses the whole school that sits on the veranda and the steps. So you can see some photos of that. The construction photos are usually my favorite part of the building and the photos because there's such a rawness and yeah. If you see just the skeleton and before all the smooth and shiny and clean finishes are introduced, it gives a really okay. Design principles. Okay, as I said first. Okay, obviously a very important thing is the spaces, but I'm not going to dwell on that too much. There's obviously now the outside. We usually design the building, kind of first identify the outside spaces, and you then place the buildings around that spaces to define them and live out on them. The sketch here was the initial planning, but that's for like phases to come. So. Which I don't think will happen, but I mean that's how it usually goes. The second important thing was you sit with this brief of just accommodate these functions, but you know it's a school, it's a new organization. There's an identity that's needed in the facility, and we felt it's important to give a very strong figure to the facade that's kind of this. Just a very simple roofscape of repeating almost the roof rhythm that is there and just continuing it very simply on the same plane. Also relating to the roofs in the area because you kind of look down on the side as you drive around it. And then the side steps down to increase the volume from the science lab on this side to the more public functions on the lower end of the block. Here you can see the screen wall with that space that's now that threshold space, which is the outside foyer that's created in between the two spaces. Here you can see just a model of the roof structure. The roofs in our work is kind of one of the most important elements of the architecture because it's almost the element that you as a person relate the most to shelter. It's the thing that shelters you. So we often, when we work on a design, try to really focus on making the roof as simple and as straightforward as possible. Here you can see another photo of that space. And the light quality, because the screen face east, so in the mornings when everybody arrives at school, it's really gives a really remarkable atmosphere, with the sun coming through the screen. So in order also to kind of make the building belong in that setting that's so landscape dominant, we made a small opening for the garden also to move into the building. So you've got the human scale opening here, and then there's a small opening there for the garden to move in. And then you can just see some more photos. And there's a few specific cutouts in the roof to get light into the spaces that ended up being a bit more deep. And then you've got a view to, that's Helderberg Mountain. Quickly on the sections, the way that light comes into a building is obviously crucial to create the atmosphere on the inside. So with the building plan footprints being so deep, we just shaped the roof trusses a little bit different to have roof or skylights to get light into this deeper spaces here. So there you can see what that looks like. So it's an angled, just an angled ceiling against the truss, and then the light comes. And the reflection against the timber is very nice. It makes the light much warmer with the yellow tone. So there you can see what that looks like. The furniture is what they got donated, what somebody donated to them. So we didn't have any say on that, but it's kind of part of say what their story is and who they are, and that's part of them. It's not doesn't help we try and curate that as well. So currently this is now used as a staff room, and then there's a meeting breakout room, and then there's a classroom on the opposite side of this door, and then it can be opened up to be kind of a venue like that. And then just the construction process. Okay. Construction process, you can just see the nice photos of the blocks there. Then I'm going to go to the next. Okay. The next project is something completely different. It is a water treatment facility for the city of Cape Town. So it's an infrastructure project that engineers did the plant design, so the whole technical thing, and then we were just asked to do, well, they usually just ask you to choose the bricks and the paint colors, but they actually say it must be a nice environment, there must be an office, and we must say what the facades and like the envelope of the building must be like. So it's an aquifer recharge plant, so under the Cape Flats there's a big aquifer. So this is where the site's located. It's Viljoen Nature Reserve, which is a City of Cape Town Nature Reserve, and there are hippos there. And there's a wastewater treatment plant for the whole Cape Flats there. The maturation ponds of the flats are, it's a bizarre setting because it's like you're in a nature reserve, but it's a wastewater plant and there's a solid waste management site next to it. So it's really almost abstract in a way. And the water from that's now been treated through the whole wastewater plant then gets treated through this water treatment plant that we now worked on. And then it gets to a very high standard, almost potable, but then it gets pumped back into the aquifer to manage the level, because obviously you can see the aquifers next to the sea, so there's salt water and fresh water, and that line you want to manage to not get too far into the aquifer, so they need to keep the levels up. So the client wanted, who is the municipality of Cape Town, just wanted the building to be a bit of a flagship because the technology was something that is something that they can brag about and ask for more funding from overseas. So they want to bring overseas people here and ask for more funding. And then it's next to the ocean, so the environment is super corrosive, and it needed to be hard-wearing city, don't do maintenance, so everything very, very robust. This is what you get from the engineers then. It's their Revit model of the plant. It's like, they still engineers, it's mostly water retaining structures that are underground, and then they just put the concrete frame with windows and a roof over it. But the whole process is very detailed. Obviously, it's designed on these 4 platforms that step down from high to low. The water flows from high to low. So the hydrology of the design, meaning you draw literally like a line here, because that line will say if something's higher than that, the water won't go over. If it's lower than that, the water goes over. And so it goes down through the filters to one of these pump stations at the bottom where it gets pumped back. So all the engineers told us is they want a dignified working environment for the people. So that means it's all these filters with the shed roof over, so it's very industrial. So that means just putting windows in that, so that there's natural light. And then there's a lot of water in it, so the algae grows as it gets light, so it must be controlled light, there mustn't be too much light, otherwise there's a maintenance issue. So, just a bit of show what the site looks like. The wind blows a lot there, you can see how the companies grow. It's right in the southeast there, you can see Viljoen and Sandstone Mountains. This is what the existing plant looks like. It's very, actually amazing. It's this old 1970s plant. So in this environment, that's something, it's like a whole thing on its own. And then you've got all these wastewater plant dams, called PSTs. This is the site that we work on. So obviously when we get into a context like that, or any context, we always ask ourselves firstly, how does it fit into the urban setting, or what is the, if we zoom out, what influence or what improvement will that thing that you do have to the environment? Or at least how will it be read and used and interpreted in conjunction with that? So on the wastewater side, it's very, it forms a little city almost of its own. So it's this little abstract context of this 1970s buildings in a nature reserve, but also in the middle of the Cape Flats. So it became a really almost a bizarre or abstract context. But the most important thing we basically had to do was just say, okay, how do we deal with the admin building? And because all the other plant buildings, we can't do anything to that, and the water won't be clean when it comes out on the other side. So these principles that we usually look at is just the normal things you look at in a city. Is it legible? Can you understand where to go naturally if you get there? So is there identity to the components and the elements and the thing as a whole? So with the admin building, we basically decided it mustn't be like a small little thing on its own, because we also couldn't get the scale of it to communicate the hierarchy of the head of the plant. So we said, okay, we're just going to add it to one of the plant buildings, which is this building here, and the admin building is the front side here. So it reads as one thing, but then there's a clear distinction of the order where it's a plant building versus where it becomes an admin building. And there's a distinction in the scale where it's a plant building here, where it's a 2-story scale, and then where it's more a human scale, we bring it down to a single story scale with a slab that's introduced in that facade. Then obviously, the same as with the previous building, yeah, it's almost more extreme because you've got man versus machine. So you, as Jerry once put it, you want to humanize the infrastructure. You want to just show that there's a mark of a human in the building. It's not all machines. And the way we see it is, if we just intentional and specific with things and not just leaving it to the contractor or to the client or to whoever to decide how it must be, and paying attention to that level of detail. Just a few sketches of the design process is very, it was very simple because it was the envelope, or let me just maybe go on that for a second. It's basically just these long envelopes. It's now the wall of the building. You must say how you're going to put the windows in. And what we've found work nicely is the buildings are orientated with the long facades showing east and west. So north on there is to the left. So it's just the head of the building that's got a good orientation. The rest of the facades are very exposed in the morning, very exposed in the afternoon to sun. So we wanted to prevent the light from getting directly in. So we made the facade in fins like this that faces south, and then there's a small window facing south with a bit of a tinted glass in. But then where it gets to the human side, we start changing that order. Here it opens up to the view, that was to the western side, and to the eastern side we open it up to the northern side. So we completely switched around that order. What was nice about these fins is the two things that it gave us depth to the facade, so it created these very dramatic, very nice shadows. And the second thing is also it symbolized the whole filtration thing very nicely with these almost gill-like structures. That's what it looks like. An elevation. I don't think I need to go through. I'll quickly go through the plan. Okay. Another thing that I didn't mention on our design process is what's very important for us is usually well, I should have mentioned because it's the topic. It's this creating of good spatial qualities. Spatial qualities that is something that is a bit more specific, especially in terms of the volume and the light that gets into the space. So on the plan for the admin building, you enter on this platform. This platform continues throughout the whole length of the plant building. So it starts here. The screen wall here is pulled loose from the facade. So this is almost like a cavern that you walk into. And this is a glass facade then with a front door where you come into the foyer. So this space has then got a very specific dynamic with that screen wall that protects you from the like the very machine-dominated environment. But it also has just a few specific moments with the light that comes in, and then it makes it very inviting to come into here where the reception is. This door on the ground floor is the blue collar side, so that's all the locker rooms, the mess facilities for the staff, the braai area for the staff, which is always important on a plant. And then the laboratory here. And then you go upstairs up the stairs to this side. So here you now on top of the admin in this double volume that looks down, and from here you kind of look out over the view. And it's got a big boardroom. So here, this boardroom is now where they want to impress all the possible investors, and it's got a balcony with a view. And also connected visually to the control room, which has a window over the plant, the filters of the plant here, so that everybody can kind of read how the building works when you're in it. So just explaining that on the section, which is quite also important to see the volumes, is you can see the screen here, which is kind of a visualized sunscreen to protect it, because this glass is all facing west, so you don't want the sun on it. And then it has this deep entrance with a balcony, and yeah, you can see the internal spaces there. Okay, again, the most exciting photos. Okay, start wrapping up. We'll go through the exciting photos very quickly. Well, yeah. This is very, I'll show this.
It's worth it.
This is the piles, like I say, the foundations actually, it's just cast, but then when you start excavating that, it starts making this very nice structures. it ends up being under the ground, but it makes you imagine you can actually build like a Greek temple underground and then you excavate the sand. I'll just show some final. You can see the kind of spaces that's created in the plant areas. So this is nothing of our input, this is engineering, which creates this very dramatic spaces. Filters being water tested. I think one of the best stages for me for the project was when the buildings were done, but they haven't done the paving around it yet. So you just have the sand and the concrete and the bricks are almost the same color, just coming up like ruins out of the sand. But unfortunately, they had to drive there, so we had to pave it. So this is the final. So obviously the dramatic hard shadows makes it a very even more almost abstract, austere place, but very nice to be at. So interior, it's government offices, so the interior it's nice for government, but it's and these are like the majority of the spaces, the plant spaces. There we just chose the colors. What was important for us is, as I said earlier, what the building is saying. We're always thinking about it. The act of building something is making culture. So what is the culture we're saying? Or we can either be proactive in trying to create a good culture, or we can just be reactive and do the default thing that you usually do if you don't have the will to put in a lot of effort.
Thank you. Wasn't that completely extraordinary? And I just love the sort of erudite quality of your buildings and the kind of little pieces that you cut out of the buildings, almost like little punctuation marks. That's a beautiful signature feature. Jan-Dirk, I wanted to ask you why you became an architect. It's a challenging, difficult, complex kind of profession. And I'm just curious, why did you decide to become an architect?
That's a good question. I actually wanted to be a musician. And luckily, I studied psychology first. After deciding myself I'm not going to do music, because I realized the monetary constraints. And I didn't know what to do, so I just did a BA in psychology. It was very interesting, but I realized that's definitely not what I want to do. And so maybe to make it long short is, I actually didn't engage with what I wanted to do for a long time. No exposure to architecture. So I come from normally you look up to your parents and you do what they do, but I didn't want to be a physicist or a physio, so I didn't want to be like my brothers, who's engineers. So I was like, but I did like science and art, I think, and for me at that point it was just like, how do I combine some sort of logic and some sort of intuitive approach to what I do, and then I looked further and spent a lot of time in the university library just looking at what is architecture actually, because I know it's so funny, you live in buildings but you don't, it just goes over your head and you've got an opinion about it, but I don't really have a strong opinion about it. So it's something I grew into. Got a big shock in my first year, because I aced psychology, and I didn't do well in architecture, and it was very refreshing because maybe that's something that I think Gustav didn't say, is the way you get to that end product, that building, is vast amounts of iterative drawing, and the process is the key thing thing for us. So you need to, later it becomes more intuitive, but even now, I think until we do our final building, we'll still be having to go through an iterative process, numerous solutions, because there's not one way to do things. So that is something I had to learn, to relearn, because the university context is very much textbook oriented. So whilst the architecture, when Viljoen really has a good university, like school of architecture, well, in my opinion, but it was really different to a normal curriculum, and just coming from a normal, almost rigid way of thinking, you have to grapple with numerous possibilities.
Can I ask you then, riffing off that, how your Christianity impacts your architecture? If it does.
It definitely does. I will say that it's almost like I think there's a natural appreciation of nature that is prevalent in most people, and I think architecture is similar to that. That it's when you look at if you go for a walk in Viljoen, then even if you're not a Christian, you maybe will start questioning like the creation of something. So I think that quality of, not that we can ever replicate that, but how we fit into the context and how we communicate the culture of, or how do we create culture, or a new setting, because you're basically creating a new space. That, for me, in a way, is like I'm trying to, hopefully, someone would stop and ponder about something.
Thank you, that's a great answer. Gustav, I again want to look at that. I think architecture is a kind of balancing act between right brain and left brain, between creativity and budget, between your dreams and those of your clients, maybe the material and the ethereal. I think you alluded to some of that in your presentation, but how do you negotiate these challenges as an architect and as a Christian?
I always want to say it's a battle more than a challenge. So I think the as a Christian, the biggest influence to me with regards to that is almost, it's obviously a bit connected to personality as well, but it comes down to almost work ethic and the willingness to endure, even though it's actually not worth it in a lot of logical senses, like you spend so much time and so much effort on something to get it good, where you can actually just like quickly get the same amount of money and move on. But there's something that I think strongly comes from being a Christian and wanting to just glorify God by what we're doing. I mean, I'm saying that on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm fighting with people all the time as well, because it's a real struggle to get a building complete ultimately.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the iterative process that you mentioned, the kind of grind, kind of contemplation as well, is a meditative quality of sitting with something, putting in the effort, but also
yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not only all the like the hurdles like the municipality and approvals and costs and neighbors and blah blah blah. It's also that almost insecurity of is this the best? So like really engage in your thought process and your imagination very consistently and for very long times on very specific things so that you are ultimately satisfied with the solution. I always feel like yes, it feels like a marathon and you feel so almost depressed, not depressed, but like, yes, I'm struggling with this thing until you get to a solution where you think, okay, this is the right thing, and then it just, all of that is just like, disappeared.
Wonderful, thank you. It seems like, it sounds a bit like raising children, doesn't it? Jan-Dirk, I want to ask you, a friend of mine, Viljoen, once said to me that she wears glasses, and she says that her mother said that she's never had her glasses on when people take photographs of her because glasses date you. And so I wanted to ask you about taste. You know, as an architect, you're not just creating an artwork that someone can sort of take off their walls and put a new one there. It has to have a certain longevity. But you also want the building to be kind of edgy and cool and of the moment, and so how do you negotiate that question of taste as something to celebrate, but also something in a sense to overcome?
That's definitely a big challenge. Pinterest. So, like, that's open a whole, I don't know, I mean, it's good and bad. We tend to, we definitely steer away from trying style, if that's the other word one can use. Although fascinating, I mean, if you say, sometimes like, I have a lot of appreciation. I think we live in a moment where there's so much visual clutter out there, and so many different styles of doing that it almost does not make sense to brand yourself with a specific aesthetic or specific visual appearance. I think just comparing that to, let's say, 1920s, 30s, when the modernist movement, there was a very much clearer stream of thought, and it would have made sense in that time to maybe tap into that. So our struggle is to almost remove, it's a thing of removing a lot of noise, and we've got, I think, a few principles that we try and lay over a project. For instance, I think with the two projects Gustav showed, it's quite clear that you can react very differently, and we try to be guided by the context. So I think that's the key thing. We will not, I don't think, we're not the type of architects that can create a building like this. This is amazing, and this is an object in of itself, and it is the context. So a lot of the time, we're reacting to the context. Sometimes we'll be the context creator. That's this really scary project because it's much easier to kind of fit in. So, and I think in terms of materiality and longevity, the quality building is the one that lasts the longest in terms of people accepting it. So if people accept your building is important. A taste will, 2 or 3 years' time, so you'll have to redo it. So that's our benchmark, is if we can create buildings that last.
Yeah, I love that about your design. It feels quite humble. It feels like something that isn't trying to be very obvious or very visible or impose itself. There's a sort of integrity to that, which I think is very moving and effective. Okay, I'm going to ask my last question to Gustav, and then there should be 5 minutes for Q&A from the audience. So start thinking about brilliant questions, no pressure. Gustav, how important are chairs? It feels like a lot of architects also design famous chairs, and you can stand a row and others. And I saw some beautiful chairs in your buildings online when I looked at the homes, and that made me wonder how annoying it must be to see people put really ugly furniture in beautiful buildings. And you alluded to that earlier, so I guess the question is, to what extent can you hand over a building to humans who are not designers versus trying to kind of control the life of the building? And it's also sort of a question about trust. I suppose, you know, how as a creative you are also to some extent subordinate to God, whose sovereignty is something that in a sense you have to resign yourself to. I hope that's not a metaphor that's, too heavily burdened. But could you comment on that a little bit?
Yes, it is quite a tricky one, because, okay, personally, I'm not personally that attentive or necessarily tuned to interior detail in a way. So I was always of the opinion that if I do a house for somebody else, the way I view a house is that it's a very personal thing, that's the extension of the people, the family, and it's made up out of all the things that they've collected in their memories, and it's got meaning for them. So I'm quite conflicted with the way that it works. If you want to be a good house architect with a good brand, you obviously need nice photos in magazines, but you can't have people's furniture in the photos, because you know no magazine wants that. So how then we get that, and then they literally take the people's furniture out, they come with a truck and start it for the photo shoot, and it's like, looks nice. The way currently I feel it is quite conflicting, the way that buildings are designed versus the way people use it, because if you don't like literally do the whole interior as well, then there's a clash between the architecture and the interior, which means either the architecture is too strong maybe, or so that's where my thoughts stand on.
It is always such a balancing act. Yeah, it's wonderful. Okay, questions. There's a question over here, and one at the back there.
No, thanks guys. That was really great. I don't know whether you're familiar with Daniel Libeskind. And so I watched his stuff on YouTube, his lectures on YouTube, and then got an opportunity to get to go to Berlin and visit his Jewish museum, and walked in, and everything was speaking. There was this orchestra in architecture, or architecture orchestra. And then I get back home. This is what is missing. So the buildings that speak, the buildings that pretty much don't say so much. And I just use my wife's story. So I designed that home back in the day, and there's this divide between the contractor and the architect. And you just get back, and everything is just a total mess. So they get contractors and mess the staircase, and it just your spirit just goes down. So this is where my question comes in. How have you dealt with the clients that sort of are not able to see? So the stuff you're saying, I think you spoke about this, but I'd like you to push more, and I'd like to hear you more on this. Clients that are not seeing the way you are seeing, yours they don't see.
I'll take the question. Just quickly on Daniel Libeskind, which is what is interesting is he's well known for that museum. The other day, like it's interesting because he's doing a new kind of commercial tower somewhere, and it looks a lot like that museum. He's kind of created a style out of his own museum, and it doesn't work. I think so. It's interesting. Like you can be your own worst enemy, maybe in that sense. On the contractor thing, a client-architect relationship, it depends on what type of client. So if it's residential, we've now come to a point where we almost had an interview with them beforehand to make sure that we align that they buy into our vision. Because it's very important that they trust you. If the trust is not established early on, you'll get that conflict. And then secondly, I think they won't get the true value of what you can offer. So what we obviously find is everyone's an architect. Everyone wanted to be an architect, and so everyone's got their own ideas. But there's the truth that, is that you are a professional person, you've worked in this for 10 years, 15 years. So there's just certain things that will work better. So we find that to preempt that and align ourselves early on is much better. We've obviously had, when you start out, you take on clients that's not necessarily aligned, and then it is a thing of, usually, luckily we work with 3D models, so you can kind of convince them more realistically, instead of just reading 2D plans, they can see the spaces better, so hopefully that will convince them. So we've got a few tools we can use.
Hello. I was just curious about the name, SALT. I just wanted to ask you what the significance of SALT is, how you came up with that.
I don't want to name the business after myself and whoever joins in the future, because we become a brand, so that was the first point. And then I was kind of going through the name ideation process with a friend, and I think you all know the biblical metaphor of salt, and it is it deals, or it's something that's put in the things that are broken and needs reparation, but it's also something that's not obvious and visible and novel or unique. So it's got that. It represents those values.
Oh, okay. Is your question?
Okay, I already have the last question. Anyone? Okay, yes, go ahead.
Hello, James. I just wanted to ask in terms of the chairs and the setup, because I work with a podcast, and one thing that we've been struggling with is deciding on the chairs. So finding the chairs has been a very challenge for us, and so I just wanted to find out, how does the interior or the setup influence the viewer in this instance, or the homeowner, in terms of the feeling and identity, and how do you make the best of actually what you have without going for designer and what should you answer?
Yeah, you should speak to Joan for you, she's the interior designer.
Yeah, not so much a question, more of a compliment. I was a teacher at Falling Academy for 2 years, so I sat on those horrible chairs. Which is a great part of it. But I think more than anything, what's really struck me about being in this space is that it's a redemptive environment. And being a place that's catering to low-income learners and giving them an opportunity to be in spaces that they may never have access to. I think that's been something that's been really, really critical, just to see the transformation of how they've adapted to this space, loved and thrived in it. And I think you don't always get to hear the feedback, but it's really been an incredible difference that's made in many young learners' lives, and I think within the staff component as well, in how you know what the previous staff room was like, but how to create a space where engagements could happen that wouldn't happen. So I just want to say, like, from my side, in the experience of what you guys have done, phenomenal job, and yeah, maybe many more.
Well, amazing, thank you very much.
Any last questions, someone? Okay. Gustav, Jan-Dirk, thank you. It was extraordinary. I feel charmed and moved. And I think what you've done is show us in very literal and yet also poetic ways what a humble, irreverent,